artist. Remember last week we learned about the artist Faith Ringgold and her story quilts? Well, today we're going to be finishing your story quilt, and all you're going to need is your paper from last week, some drawing supplies, and a small paper for this week. All right, so let's get started. So this is the story quilt I have already created, and around the outside we had the quilt and all the textures that we created last week to create the quilt part of ours. Now today we're going to do the story, and what I want you to do when you're thinking of your story today is think of a positive, an uplifting or happy memory that you might have, and I would like it to be based off an experience that you have done, which means it's something that you've done. Try to avoid things like getting a gift, video games, or something like that. But what I want you to do is think of something, some memory that you have that brings you some joy or happiness. And this is a memory that I have created. I remember when I was a little girl, we lived in a house that had a big hill. And one of my favorite things to do this time of year was have a kite and fly the kite. And I remember I would just spend hours in our backyard. I would get the kite up really high in the sky. I'd lay down on the grass and I'd just watch and imagine what it was like to be that kite flying through the sky. So that's a very happy memory for me. Now, you can come up with something totally different. It might have something to do with camping or fishing or something that's happened in school, but try to think of something that brings you happiness. So what you're going to do is take your paper from last time, and now you could, if you don't have another paper to fit on top, that's okay. You could simply just draw right in the middle, but you should probably think of an idea before you start. Now, I always like to draw my idea in pencil first, and so what you need to do is think of how you're going to fill up this paper with your memory. You can include yourself in it or not. Maybe you just want to have it something that you're looking at to try to remember. Like, okay, so I have a memory of last year doing my garden, and I grew a lot of things from seed. I grew pretty much all the vegetables in the garden from seed, which I felt a lot of pride and joy in. I grew tomatoes and I grew zucchini. I did grow some flowers too. I grew peppers. So I grew all kinds of things. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just draw some things in my garden. Obviously I can't draw everything from my whole garden or the whole season, but my garden does bring me a good deal of happiness. So I'm just going to draw some things. I think they'll put the handle back here. This is my watering can. And I think I will, because I started a lot of the pots inside my house before, when it was still quite cold, and it made me so happy in the middle of winter. Towards when the weather's still kind of crummy, it made me so happy that I was able to grow little plants inside. So I had a little tray with all my little seedlings. I make the little box. And I had all these little plants growing inside here. They were in little tiny pots. So I'm going to draw a bunch of these in here, and once I get my pencil sketch done, I'm just going to just put some of these, and I think I'll add my window right here. Maybe I'll show the sun kind of coming in, even though it's still wintry outside, that I was happily growing little green things, and it made me think of summer. And it really did make me super happy. So once you get your sketch all done, what you're going to do is you're going to want to add color to your picture. So now that I have this sketched, the next thing I am going to do is I'm going to take and start kind of finalizing this picture. Now I'm going to take a marker and outline. You could use really any color. So if you wanted to use lots of different colors to outline, or if you're doing it like me and you just want to use one color to outline, it doesn't even have to be black. It could be any sort of color. And I also will use some crayons or colored pencils to color this in. So I'm going to use the time lapse in my editing here just so it doesn't take so long for you to watch. Besides, your memory is probably going to be different from mine. I expect that it might have some people from your family or other things, maybe a pet involved. So I would like you to come up with your own, and when I get mine all finished, I'll stop and I'll chat with you about it and what to do next in our picture. So I have my memory completed here. I've tried to do a really nice job of coloring this, adding things like shadows and textures to the picture, as much detail as I can on this small piece of paper. So once you have yours complete, the next step is to take your glue, and what you're going to do is you're going to add glue. I like to add it all the way around the corners, all the way around the edge, and maybe just like an X, and then put it right in that empty space in the middle. Remember, if you just drew it right in there, you don't have to do this part. Then at the end, I like to take my marker that I was using for outlining, and it doesn't have to be black. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually outline, if you feel like it needs the outline of your shapes so that you can see them a little more clearly. I like this to do this, and I'll even probably go around my story quilt, my story part of the quilt. And then when I get this all done, I'm going to do one more thing to make it really look like a quilt. So I will speed through this process right here so that we can get to the fun part right at the end. Now, if you don't have a marker at home that you do this with, you can also use like a dark colored crayon, black or gray or dark purple. Now, to make this really look like a quilt, what we're going to do is we are going to add some stitches, and there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can simply just do little lines, and you're going to do this. Since I started with this straight line, I'm going to do that all the way around my quilt and the memory part of my quilt. And it really already starts to look like it's sewn onto there. Now there is another kind of stitch you can do if you don't want to do all straight lines. You can also do a crisscross or an X. They call this a cross stitch. I think I'll do that in all of my diagonal lines here in the corners. Now you can do that for everything too if you'd like that look, or you can do like I'm doing where you use both. But the X has to kind of intersect right where your line, where the two pieces of fabric would be. That's what would be holding it together. Okay, so I'm also going to add stitches in between each of the textures. And there you go. I have my story quilt complete. I can't wait to see what you do for your memory. Remember, try to think of some positive, happy, uplifting memory that brings you some sort of joy. When you get your story quilt done, all the stitching, all the coloring, I would love to see it. So show it to me on Seesaw. And if you're at home, of course, you can also show it to me on Artsodia, add it to your portfolio. All right, so I hope you've had fun thinking of something that brings you joy, fun creating textures and coloring and making stitches on this one. All right, have a great day, everyone. And until next time, goodbye.